freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
In 1963, Democratic President John F. Kennedy gave voice to America's long-standing commitment to solidarity with Europe when he proclaimed himself a citizen of Free Berlin.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
That commitment to Europe was shared across generations and across party lines, as Republican Ronald Reagan demonstrated in his challenge to the Soviet leader at the Berlin Wall in 1987.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Russia, Russia, Russia. You ever hear of that deal? You don't have the cards.
This was the moment that seemed to break the relationship between the U.S. government and its European allies. Donald Trump's humiliation and bullying of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stunned the Western world, and the reaction in Europe was intense.
Can Ukraine win the war without America, Mr. President?
2 days later, Zelenskyy was given a hero's welcome in London, followed by a summit in which he was embraced by European leaders and Canada's Justin Trudeau.
Democratic, free Ukraine will be...
Europe's sense of loss is expressed by former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielis Landsbergis.
For decades, all the countries under oppression, all the journalists under pressure, all the minority groups around the world, they were looking into the US as the land of the free, actually where the support will always come from and feel understood if you're fighting for freedom. I think that this is actually the biggest shock, that this is no more.
Analyst Sarah Pagan grew up in a Germany that felt it was under the protection of the U.S.
I think it's really like a watershed moment to see that this is something that is crumbling and falling apart in the form as we have known it. And it's kind of like, I think we're really entering a new era, and it's an era that I'm convinced is less secure for all of Europe.
U.S. General Philip Breedlove spent most of his military career in Europe. He served as a Supreme Allied Commander there. Now retired, he keeps in close contact with many European friends.
What they always said to me was that the United States is the backbone without which NATO would really have a hard time functioning. And that America represented that last stand of defense on what we call Western values.
Zelenskyy's White House meeting was clearly on the mind of French President Emmanuel Macron in his dramatic TV address to the French nation shortly after. He expressed the worry that the U.S. was switching sides in the Ukraine war.
Et je veux croire que les États-Unis resteront à nos côtés. Mais il nous faut être prêts si tel n'était pas le cas.
I think that he's stepping in the shoes of European leader, because at least at this point, there's nobody else. We have to get moving and do our thing, rather than you just be observers of, the whole situation in Washington.
$350 billion. We gave you military equipment.
A key reason for Trump's break with his allies is his oft-repeated lie that the U.S. has given Ukraine far more economic and military aid than the Europeans. What are the facts? The actual figures have been totaled up by the nonpartisan Kiel Institute in Germany. If you look at all government support to Ukraine from 2022 through 2024, the United States has provided 114.2 billion euros, while the European countries provided 132.3 billion. Emmanuel Macron tried to gently correct Trump on this point in his own Oval Office meeting days before Zelenskyy arrived there.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort.
At almost every appearance since, Trump returned to his favorite false figure.
$350 billion. $350 billion.
Let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
The incoming German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has long been seen as one of the most pro-American of European politicians, but he just called for Europe to achieve independence from the United States. He also promised a $500 billion German military buildup, while the other EU members will push for $800 billion.
Anything that Europe does to make itself better at defending itself will help our alliance.
Article 5 is the heart of the NATO treaty that requires nations to come to the aid of any member in the event of a foreign attack, just as Canada and other NATO members joined the U.S. in the Afghanistan war after 9/11. Donald Trump has repeatedly cast doubt on the U.S. willingness to honor the Article 5 commitment.
Well, I've said that to them. I said, if you're not going to pay, we're not going to defend.
Analyst Ian Bremmer is founder of the Eurasia Group.
The political alignment of NATO has taken a very serious hit over the last 50-plus days since Trump has been inaugurated. The U.S. is prepared to act unilaterally and is prepared to openly question, at least in some circumstances, its Article 5 commitments to other countries. That, of course, makes NATO weaker.
I think we're at a point where it's not really clear anymore if the US would really be willing to use its military instruments to, let's say, protect Tallinn or Warsaw or Berlin.
Do you believe the U.S. would come to the aid of Lithuania if it was attacked?
Well, it's not important what I feel, but it's important what Putin thinks. And Putin has gotten quite a lot of proof that U.S. commitment to Europe is not as strong as it has been.
One of the key aspects of European defense is the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Many European countries agreed not to obtain nuclear weapons in exchange for a U.S. guarantee that they would be protected by American nukes. Now they are beginning to doubt that guarantee. France has always maintained its own nuclear forces, and now Friedrich Merz has asked that the French extend their umbrella over the rest of Europe and offered to help pay for that. Macron quickly agreed. He and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer have been methodically assembling a coalition of the willing to come to Ukraine's assistance in light of backpedaling from the United States. They have announced that both countries are prepared to deploy troops to provide security guarantees to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire, but have asked the United States to back up those troops with logistics and intelligence support.
To ensure that this deal is something which is not violated.
I guess the point is it possible that Europe could replace the U.S. as the main defender of Ukraine?
Replace implies that everything the Americans have been doing, that the Europeans would be able to do at the same level, and the answer to that is no, without unacceptable risk. Could the Europeans, by themselves, without the U.S., deter the Russians from further incursions into Ukraine? There, I think the answer is quite possibly.
General Breedlove believes that Europeans will need U.S. help to provide security guarantees for Ukraine.
What America will have to bring is those things we often call enablers. The air dimension, the long-range intelligence and strike missions, the nuclear mission to give background to England and France. And America is going to be required to do that for some time.
Almost exactly 80 years ago, the three great powers met in Yalta, Crimea, to divide up the post-war world. What Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin agreed then had profound consequences, especially for the Eastern European countries that were left under Soviet domination for generations. As Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin enter into negotiations over Ukraine and the security structure of Europe, with the Europeans on the sidelines, what is at stake this time?
At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, but whether or not NATO is going to continue to be a robust collective security agreement, what the nature of the European relationship with the United States will be.
The centrality of Ukraine cannot be overstated. We all have a stake in this. If Ukraine is forced to capitulate, then it's an incredibly dangerous historic period.